Today's story is truly remarkable. It is about how a millionaire's hidden camera caught a secret act by his maid that changed his life forever. Alexander was a man defined by power and wealth. His mansion stood like a fortress on the hill, all marble floors, polished glass, and gleaming chrome. Business cards, luxury cars, and endless meetings formed the rhythm of his life. But behind the walls of his sprawling estate, a chill lingered, the chill of loneliness, distrust, and the need for control. Years of betrayal by those he trusted had hardened his heart. Hiring a maid had never been easy for Alexander. Previous employees had disappeared with valuables, leaked family secrets, or worse, pretended to care while plotting behind his back. So when Marina appeared at the doorstep, recommended by a distant acquaintance, Alexander's suspicions were immediate. She was young, polite, and spoke little, but his gut told him to be cautious. Before Marina even unpacked her small bag, Alexander had already decided he would not leave anything to chance. The next morning, his security team installed discreet hidden cameras in the main rooms of the house. Not in the bedrooms, he told himself. Respecting privacy, but every corridor, every living room, every kitchen corner, all watched by invisible eyes. When Marina entered the house, she did so under the quiet gaze of the cameras. Alexander spent the day reviewing footage on his private monitor, looking for any signs of dishonesty or neglect. Every movement she made was precise and silent. She cleaned without complaint, arranged flowers with care, and never once touched anything that wasn't hers to touch. But Alexander's mind remained restless. He had built his empire on caution and control, yet something about Marina's calm presence unsettled him. Could it be that this time he was wrong? Or was there a hidden truth waiting to reveal itself in the shadows of his grand home? Alexander sat in his private study, eyes glued to the glowing screen. Every day since Marina had arrived, he had made it his mission to watch her every move through the hidden cameras. He looked for anything suspicious, anything that could confirm his doubts, a careless gesture, a stolen glance, a misstep. But the more he watched, the more his certainty began to waver. Marina's routine was quiet, but thorough. She woke early, moved softly through the halls, dusting the expensive furniture, polishing silverware, and sweeping the marble floors. She greeted the household staff politely, never raising her voice, never complaining even when the days were long and demanding. Her hands worked steadily, as if driven by a deep sense of duty rather than obligation. Alexander noticed how she arranged fresh flowers in the grand foyer each morning. The delicate lilies and roses seemed to brighten the cold halls just a little. Yet, despite her impeccable work, Alexander's mind remained restless. Trust did not come easily, not after years of betrayal and deception. One night, as Alexander reviewed the footage late in the study, something caught his eye: Marina slipping quietly out of the kitchen and moving toward the east wing of the house. His heartbeat quickened as the camera followed her steps down the long hallway lined with family portraits. She stopped in front of a closed door, the room where Alexander's daughter Sophia was confined. The girl had been ill for months, kept hidden away from the public eye, her condition a well-guarded secret. Alexander rarely visited, too busy with his empire, leaving the care of Sophia to others. To his surprise, Marina did not just enter the room to clean. She carefully pulled out a small bag from beneath her apron, producing a bottle of medicine and a thermometer. Tenderly, she checked Sophia's temperature, adjusted the blankets, and whispered soothing words that Alexander could only hear faintly through the surveillance feed. For the first time since the cameras were installed, Alexander felt a pang of something unfamiliar, something close to admiration. This was no ordinary maid. There was more beneath Marina's calm exterior, something powerful and deeply human. He leaned closer to the screen, eyes fixed on the quiet scene playing out before him. His doubts had not vanished entirely, but a new question formed in his mind. What was Marina hiding, and why did she care so much about his daughter? As the night faded into dawn, Alexander sat back in his chair, the weight of his suspicions lifting just a little. This was only the beginning. The truth was waiting, just beyond the door he had always kept shut. Sophia was no ordinary child. Behind the grand walls of the estate, away from prying eyes, she battled a silent enemy, a rare and aggressive illness that sapped her strength day by day. Doctors had warned that her condition was fragile, unpredictable, and that even the smallest mistake could cost her dearly. Alexander and his wife rarely spoke of Sophia's sickness aloud. It was a subject wrapped in fear and denial. They wanted to protect their social image and their business interests, so they kept the truth locked away like a dangerous secret. Most staff had no idea about Sophia's real state, seeing only a pale girl resting in a quiet room. Marina was different. She had a past no one knew about. Trained as a nurse in a small-town hospital before life's hardships forced her to seek work far from home. Her heart went out to Sophia from the moment she stepped into the mansion. She saw beyond the delicate features and the closed doors. She saw a child fighting for her life, and knew she had to help. Each night, Marina arrived in Sophia's room carrying her medical bag. She carefully prepared the medicine prescribed by a trusted specialist, mixing doses with precision and care. She cleaned Sophia's skin, changed her dressings, and gently administered injections when necessary. Every movement was careful and calm, as if the life of the girl depended on her steady hands, because it did. Sometimes Sophia would wake, frightened by pain or nightmares. Marina would sit by her bedside, speaking softly, stroking her hair, reassuring her that she was not alone. The maid's presence was a light in the darkness that no one else dared enter. The secret care was a risk. If Alexander or his wife discovered Marina's extra duties, they might fire her immediately, or worse, take Sophia away to a clinic where the girl would be just a patient, not a daughter. But Marina's resolve never wavered. She knew what was at stake. Behind closed doors, away from the cameras, Marina fought tirelessly. She made notes, researched new treatments, and sometimes called old friends from her nursing days for advice. Her nights were restless, filled with worry and hope in equal measure. Sophia's fragile breaths were a constant reminder of the battle being waged in silence, and as Marina worked, the girl's eyes often searched for a sign that someone cared, truly cared. Alexander, watching the footage in secret, began to understand the depth of what was happening. This was no ordinary maid. She was a guardian, a healer, a quiet hero whose story was only just beginning to unfold. Alexander found himself returning to the footage again and again, unable to look away from Marina's quiet devotion. Each night she stayed longer in Sophia's room, her hands steady as she administered care, her voice gentle as she whispered comfort. It was as if Marina carried the weight of the girl's fragile life on her own shoulders. One evening, Alexander's curiosity overcame his usual reserve. He decided to speak to Marina directly, but carefully. When she was folding linens in the hallway, he approached quietly and said, "You seem to spend a lot of time with Sophia. Is everything all right?" Marina paused, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but then she nodded. "Sophia's illness is very serious, sir. I do what I can to help." Alexander studied her for a moment. Her calm eyes and steady voice did not seem like those of a simple maid. There was something deeper, a hidden strength, a compassion that few could fake. And then came the moment that changed everything. Late one night, when the house was silent and Alexander was alone in his study, he received a message on his phone. It was from Marina. "I need to speak with you, sir." It is about Sophia." Against all his instincts, Alexander agreed to meet her in the drawing room. There Marina revealed her story, how she was once a nurse in a small town, how she had lost family to illness, and how she had taken this job to be close to a child who reminded her of someone she loved and lost. Alexander listened, feeling a strange mix of admiration and shame. He had judged her without knowing her, had watched her through hidden cameras like a prisoner instead of a person. From that night on, something shifted between them. Alexander began to trust Marina, not just as an employee, but as a protector of his daughter. He allowed her more freedom, even confiding in her his fears and hopes for Sophia's future. But the road ahead was still uncertain. Sophia's illness was a cruel enemy, and Marina's secret was a fragile light in the darkness. What would happen next? How far would Marina go to save the girl? And how would Alexander's own heart change in the process? The answers were yet to come. After their quiet conversation in the drawing room, Alexander felt an unfamiliar lightness. The burden of suspicion that had weighed on him began to ease. He no longer saw Marina through the cold lens of surveillance, but as a human being, someone who carried courage and kindness in a world that often lacked both. Marina, in turn, grew more confident in her role. Alexander's change in attitude gave her a small but precious space of freedom. She could now focus more fully on Sophia's care, without the constant fear of being discovered. But she remained cautious. The family's wealth and status cast long shadows where even the smallest secret could become a weapon. Each day, Alexander made time to check on Sophia. He entered her room quietly, watching the fragile child sleep, her pale face framed by soft curls. Sometimes he touched her hand gently, feeling the faint warmth, wishing he could do more. He began to ask Marina questions about the treatments she gave, about Sophia's condition. To his surprise, Marina answered with a calm authority that came from real knowledge and experience. She spoke not just as a maid, but as a nurse who understood the stakes. One afternoon, Alexander found himself sharing something he hadn't told anyone: his guilt. How his endless work and business deals had kept him distant from his daughter's suffering, how he had trusted others but failed to protect what mattered most. Marina listened without judgment. Then she said quietly, "I am here to help now, sir. Sophia is lucky to have someone who cares." That simple sentence carried more weight than Alexander expected. It was more than gratitude, it was a promise. But trust, fragile as it was, had its limits. Alexander knew the outside world was watching. The family's enemies lurked in the shadows, ready to exploit any weakness. And Marina's secret, her background as a nurse, her hidden care for Sophia, if discovered by the wrong people, could put everyone at risk. As days passed, Alexander began to wonder if his growing respect for Marina might one day turn into something deeper. Could a man like him, powerful, guarded and lonely, allow himself to open his heart again, or would the walls he had built for protection only keep him imprisoned? The answers lay ahead, in a future full of uncertainty, but also hope. The fragile peace that had settled over the household was about to be shattered. Alexander's growing trust in Marina did not go unnoticed. There were those within his circle who watched closely, waiting for the slightest sign of weakness. One afternoon, while Alexander was away on a business trip, an unexpected visitor arrived at the estate. Ivan, a trusted family advisor with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. His eyes flicked quickly over the rooms, and then landed on Marina. He called her into the study and spoke bluntly. "We've heard rumors about you, Marina, about your past. What exactly are you hiding?" Marina remained calm but firm. "I am here to care for Sophia, that is all." Ivan's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "People like you don't belong here. You're a liability." If Alexander knew the full truth, he would never have hired you. Word spread quickly, whispers among the staff, suspicious glances in the hallways. The cameras that once watched only Marina's movements now seemed to watch her every breath. Marina knew the danger she faced. She had sacrificed everything to be here, to help Sophia. Now her secret risked unraveling, threatening not only her job, but the fragile life she was fighting to protect. Meanwhile, Alexander returned from his trip to find tension thick in the air. He confronted Ivan, demanding an explanation. Ivan shrugged. "Just doing my duty, sir. We can't have unknown elements undermining the family." But Alexander's mind was made up. He would stand by Marina. Her courage and care had earned his respect. He would protect her, even if it meant facing enemies within his own circle. The battle was no longer just for Sophia's health, but for the truth, trust, and the fragile bonds holding the family together. What would happen next? Would Marina's secret survive the storm? And could Alexander truly open his heart to trust again? Tension in the mansion grew unbearable. Whispers about Marina's past spread like wildfire among the staff. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with pity, but none dared openly defend her. The atmosphere was thick with judgment and fear. One evening, as Marina prepared Sophia's medicine, she found a note slipped under the door. It read simply, "You don't belong here. Leave before it's too late." Her hands trembled, but she refused to show weakness. Sophia needed her more than ever. Alexander noticed the change immediately. Marina was quieter, more withdrawn. He sought her out in the kitchen and said, "I know something is wrong. You can tell me." Marina took a deep breath and whispered, "I received a threat. Someone wants me gone. They fear what I represent." Alexander's eyes darkened. "No one threatens the people I care about." Determined to protect Marina and Sophia, Alexander took measures to tighten security. He confronted his advisor Ivan with an unyielding tone. "If you want to protect this family, you protect everyone in it, no matter their past." Ivan's expression hardened, but he backed down for now. Yet, the threat was not just inside the house. Alexander received anonymous messages warning him to dismiss Marina or face consequences. His business partners grew cold, wary of scandal. In the face of growing danger, Alexander and Marina forged an unspoken alliance, a bond of trust and mutual protection. Both understood that what they shared was more than employer and employee. It was a fight for survival, for truth, and perhaps for something deeper. But the pressure was mounting. One wrong move could destroy everything. What would happen when the walls closed in? Would their fragile alliance hold, or would the past finally catch up with them? Days passed, and the tension only grew. Marina's past, once hidden in shadows, began to surface in unexpected ways. Alexander received an urgent call one evening. A reporter had uncovered information about Marina, details that could ruin not only her but the family's reputation. Alexander's heart pounded as he listened. The story painted Marina as a former criminal, a liar who had deceived him. None of it was true, but the damage was already spreading. Marina sat silently in the study, her face pale, but resolute. Alexander approached and said firmly, "We will fight this, I believe you." She looked up, gratitude shining in her eyes. For the first time she allowed herself to hope. Together, they devised a plan. Alexander used his influence to quietly discredit the reporter and control the narrative. He contacted old friends, lawyers, and even rivals to ensure Marina's name stayed clean. Behind closed doors, Marina continued to care for Sophia with unwavering devotion. She administered the medicine, soothed the child's fears, and kept her secret safe. But the danger was not over. The enemies lurking in the shadows would not give up so easily. One night, as Marina checked on Sophia, a sudden noise startled her. Someone was in the house. She froze, heart racing. The past was catching up. Marina's heart pounded as she stood in the dimly lit hallway. The faint sound of footsteps echoed through the mansion, growing louder, closer. She knew she had no time to hesitate. Silently, she moved toward Sophia's room, her hand steady despite the fear tightening in her chest. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Suddenly, a shadow appeared near the doorway, a masked intruder, intent on harm. Marina stepped forward, voice low but firm. "This house is protected. Leave now, or face the consequences." The intruder hesitated, then lunged toward Sophia's bed. Without thinking, Marina grabbed a heavy vase from the nightstand and struck out. The attacker stumbled, giving Marina enough time to pull Sophia into her arms and retreat down the hallway. Alexander, alerted by the security system, rushed back to the mansion. He found Marina holding Sophia tightly, both shaken but unharmed. The intruder had fled into the night. That night, the danger became real and undeniable. Alexander realized how much he depended on Marina, not just for Sophia's care, but for the safety of his entire family. Together, they vowed to face whatever came next. Their bond, forged through trials and secrets, had become unbreakable. But the story was far from over. The real enemy was still out there, watching, waiting. After the terrifying night, the atmosphere in the mansion slowly began to change. Alexander and Marina grew closer, their trust solidifying into a quiet partnership. The threat that once loomed so heavily now seemed a little more manageable. Sophia's health showed signs of improvement. The medicines and care Marina provided, combined with the renewed hope in Alexander's heart, began to work their magic. Small smiles appeared on the little girl's face, bringing light to the once dark halls. Alexander, once cold and distant, found himself opening up more. He spent evenings by Sophia's bedside, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes just watching. Marina was always nearby, a steady presence. One afternoon, Alexander called Marina to the study. He looked at her with newfound respect and said, "You've done more than I ever expected. You're not just an employee anymore, you're family." Marina's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Thank you, sir. That means everything to me." As the days passed, the mansion transformed. No longer just a house of wealth and power, it became a home filled with hope, care, and a second chance. Though challenges remained, Alexander and Marina faced them together, stronger, united, and ready for whatever the future might bring. In the months that followed, Sophia's condition continued to improve, slowly but surely. The bond between Alexander and Marina deepened beyond employer and employee. It became a connection built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. Alexander's once cold and guarded heart thawed, touched by Marina's kindness and unwavering dedication. The threats from the past gradually faded, as Alexander used his power to shield Marina and his family. Those who once doubted or opposed them realized that Marina was not a liability, but a guardian angel in disguise. At last, one quiet evening, as Sophia played gently in the garden for the first time in months, Alexander stood beside Marina and whispered, "Thank you for saving more than just a life. You saved us all." Marina smiled softly, knowing that her secret had become a beacon of hope. What started as suspicion and surveillance had transformed into redemption and love.
This story reminds us that sometimes the greatest miracles come from the most unexpected people, and that true strength lies in trust, compassion, and the courage to open one's heart.